Satnam, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to our first program in a series called Dialogs in Dharma. And the episode today is entitled Sikhs and Depression in the Time of COVID. And our intention is to have a lively and interesting conversation around faith-based strategies for relieving COVID-related stress and anxiety that might lead to depression or despair. So I'm hoping those of you who are tuning into this program will take a moment and put your names in the comments area and let us know where you're logged in from. That will be very useful. Kirandeep Kaur, welcome. And I'm going to introduce our panelists, our guests, in just a moment. I've got a little more introduction to say here about this topic and about our expectations for this program. Those of you who are tuning in during the program or live, please also, when you get a chance, like this program if you're on Facebook and share it. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this topic. Recent studies have shown that 30% of people are experiencing some level of depression or anxiety during the last several months due to the conditions of the worldwide coronavirus pandemic. This is 3 times higher than normal. Even Michelle Obama has confessed to battling low-grade depression. And those who are mentally, or medically, I should say, medically more vulnerable during this time of the pandemic, and also those who are financially vulnerable due to the economic conditions brought on by the pandemic, they all appear to be experiencing even much higher levels of anxiety. For this discussion, I will define depression as a serious and common mood disorder where people have persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness and lose interest in activities they once enjoyed, lasting for more than 2 weeks. So without getting too deep into either the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, used in the US, or into the ICD-10, which is the International Classification of Diseases, 10th edition, used in the UK and elsewhere, or getting into really any diagnostic process. Today, we will be focusing on really mild depression, specifically caused by or associated with the ongoing pandemic. I am not a mental health professional, but fortunately, all of our panelists today are. That said, nothing said in this program is meant to diagnose or treat any specific situation. Our intention is to offer perspectives and ideas for self-care within the technologies of Sikhi, or Sikh Dharma, and general yogic knowledge. If you or someone you know is experiencing serious problems related to depression, we encourage you to seek professional assistance in your local area. It's important that we keep in mind in this discussion that our viewers are from Sikh and 3HO communities in the US, Canada, UK, and Europe. Some of them are from Sikh families of Punjabi origin, and others are newly exploring Sikh Dharma from encountering it while pursuing Kundalini Yoga teachings. And now I'd like to introduce our panelists. I'm very excited that all of these wonderful individuals have agreed to participate. And I'm going to introduce them in no particular order, but just allow me to And let's see. Well, I think I'm going to bring them all up at once. I think. Let's see. There we go. All right. And I'm going to go around through each person. Let me introduce to you first Dr. Satkor. I'm on a wave. Thank you. Great. And she has been doing individuals and couples and family counseling since 1983 in Santa Monica and also in Santa Fe, New Mexico. She is the Secretary of Religion for Sikh Dharma International and the Director of the Sikh Dharma Ministry. Welcome, Dr. Satkor. And then we have Dr. Gobinderjeet Kaur from the UK. You can wave if you like. There you go. And she's a clinical psychologist with over 10 years experience working with clinical populations in the National Health Service, NHS, in the UK, and currently works with adults with severe and complex mental health needs. She is also a member of a wonderful charity. You might check it out, check their website out. It's Sikh Your Mind, S-I-K-H, Your Mind. And that program empowers Sikh community to consider their mental health needs and how Gurbani can support that journey. And then we have Jasvinder Singh Sandhu. You can wave. There you go. Very nice. And Jasvinder Singh is from the Vancouver area in Canada. And he's a registered clinical counselor specializing in substance abuse and mental health. And he also calls himself a Sikhologist, S-K-H-ologist. And he is the author of several publications. I found more than I was, yes, several publications. A Sikh perspective on life stress. Another one is the Sikh model of the person. And another one, the Sikh view on happiness, Guru Arjan's Sukhmani, that he wrote with Kamala Nayar. And then the socially involved renunciate, Guru Nanak's discourse to the Nath Yogis. And that he was a contributor with Kamala Nayar. So welcome, Jasvinder Singh. Good to see you. And then finally in our panel is a very long-term friend of mine and been on this path as long as I have, Dr. Guru Charan Singh Khalsa from Upland, California. And he is licensed as a marriage, family, and child therapist since 1981 and as a psychologist since 1991. He's in private practice and also has many years of experience as lead administrator of residential programs for young people in crisis. And he is also a KRI certified lead teacher trainer for Kundalini Yoga teachers. Wow, that was a lot, all of you. So welcome. So nice to have you all here. So let me just say that we're going to go through some questions that I have set up ahead of time. And then we will take questions from the viewers. So those of you who are listening and viewing audience, please, if you have any thoughts, questions, comments about any of this discussion or something that you're wanting to know about all of this, please go ahead and post those questions in the comments, and I will get to them a little later in the program. So this first question is a pretty easy question. I'm going to go sort of round robin through all of the panelists. It will help our viewers get to know you and a little bit from your perspective, what's going on in this time period. So my question is, what proportion of your counseling clients identify as Sikh or identify as being on a yogic path? And have you seen heightened levels of anxiety with these clients or your other clients since the onset of pandemic? And so we'll start with the furthest away from us, from me, Dr. Gobinderjeet Kaur. Would you like to comment?
Sure, thank you. So I work in Birmingham, which is in the Midlands and the central bit of the UK. So although I work in a very diverse community, the Sikh population don't access mental health services as much as maybe they could or they should, depending on how you want to see it. So I do other work outside of the NHS where I do see more Sikh clients, and that's via Seek Your Mind. So I'd say less than 50% I'm seeing of Sikh clients, and everyone is struggling. So Sikhs, Amritdhari, non-Amritdhari, regardless of how religious you may be or seem, everyone is really struggling at this time because we're going through such unpredictable, unprecedented pandemic times that no one could ever have predicted. Even sort of generations before us have never lived through these times. So it's a real struggle for a lot of people.
Thank you for that. Dr. Charan Singh.
So now, I would say the large majority of my clients identify as being on a spiritual path of one kind or another. And the most common symptom I see across all of them is fatigue, which is a symptom of depression. I think everybody is feeling disoriented and uncertain and sluggish of mind and body.
Thank you. That's great. I relate to that very much myself. Jasvinder Singh, would you like to comment?
I have two populations I work with. I work in a public clinic in White Rock for substance use services. And in that population, I probably have 10% of my clientele is from a Punjabi Sikh background. The remainder are Caucasian. And I also do some more work with on a contract basis, which is groups for impaired driving offenders. So those who've been driving their vehicle while impaired, and they get mandated to do a program. And I'm one of the few Punjabi-speaking group facilitators who's been facilitating groups in Punjabi. And those are 100% Punjabi males. Sometimes we do get some females. So I see the difference between the two populations. When you ask the question about spirituality, I personally believe that all my clients are spiritual. Unfortunately, they're trying to get their spiritual fix through a substance. So they are seeking something to transcend themselves, to transcend their suffering, their pain, their dukh, their kalesh, their parishaniya. So they're all spiritual in that sense. What surprises me is a lot of the Punjabis who come from the Punjab, immigrants, they show a lot of resilience. And they show a lot of resilience in the way they look at things. For example, if you come from a farming background, and my parents are from a farming background, they'd always say, "Kuch ho sakda," something could happen. We see in the Nahang tradition, "Tyaar pa tyaar," you always have to be ready. And in the West, we hear things like, "Save for a rainy day." Unfortunately, in this new era, we've been too busy filling our bucket list and not emptying our bucket list and living impulsively, living it at the moment from a very materialistic sense. So we kind of all lost our way on how to cope with crises. 100 years ago, we had Spanish influenza, and we had India being a leader in taking care of people during the Spanish influenza with limited resources. And this is, I see the immigrant population, the appreciation they show for being in a Western country. A lot of my clients will say, it's bad, but if there's going to be a pandemic, I'm very happy to be in Canada. I don't know the situation in America or England, but I assume when they make those comparisons, so there's that gratitude that allows clients to carry through this. Now, from other clients, I was surprised to hear them say, "I'm okay with a pandemic. And this is someone struggling with opiate use. And I said, why? He said, now I could catch up with the rest of the world. I've been struggling. And he said, imagine being in a race and everyone's always ahead of you. Whereas now I could catch up because they're slowing down. I've been through a lot of pain. I've been isolated. So I see a lot of resilience. At the same time, those who are suffering from profound depression, profound anxiety, no doubt the pandemic has exacerbated their symptoms, and their substance use and other unhealthy forms of coping has gone out the roof. So there is a lot of problem, but at the same time, I'm so pleased to just see a lot of folks that resilience they've shown during this. It's a real wonderful thing to see. But no doubt we have in British Columbia in particular, we lost more lives due to the opiate crisis this year than the pandemic.
Wow.
So yeah, we're in a very crisis situation, and there's still that stigma, that attitude where people feel, well, you know, that's self-inflicted harm, so it really doesn't matter. And that's a public health emergency too. Unfortunately, the way we approach it really has a very value, moral judgment attached to it. So that's what I'm seeing on the ground here.
Thank you. That was interesting. Dr. Satkar.
Sanam, not unlike Charan, most of the clients that seek my services are looking also for a spiritual component. So they are seeking in some way, shape, or form in a spiritual way. It's not the Punjabi community that I necessarily see, but actually many people from the entertainment industry is predominantly where my clientele come from. And during this time, really the area that I see most affected are relationships, because people are being forced to be together for an extended period of time that they're not used to. That's not their lifestyle. That's not the way it normally is. Most people are coming in and out of, you know, a living space, and now they're in the same living space. And so it's taken a tremendous toll on many relationships. And certainly depression is one of the elements, but also I'm seeing a lot of anxiety because of all of the elements that we are speaking about. Pandemic, political situations, fear of being sick, loss of family members, loss of friends, and then just trying to work out relationship issues under exaggerated circumstances. So I'm seeing not only depression, but also high levels of anxiety.
Thank you. That's great. I now have a question for each of you, and I'm just going to go around in whatever order. Dr. Charan Singh, there's a line from Japji Sahib by Guru Nanak, Manjit hai Jagjit, which is often translated to mean, if you can have victory over your mind, then you can have victory over the world or over your life. From a psychological view, how can we find balance with the various parts of our minds during this time? Or must we just continue to endure a chaotic mindscape?
Well, I look to Satnam for the answer to that, which is a simple expression of one's truth. And to be able to be in your truth allows you to be free to be where you are. If there is another person who can hear your truth, who can receive you in your truth, then it it relieves pressure. It's simple. I'm sad, I'm unhappy, I'm frightened. And to be able to be in that without judgment, without criticism. I should be something different. What's wrong with me that I feel this? Brings relief in itself. So the first step for me is grounding within your own truth. The second step is being able to share that truth in a safe relationship, where that can be simply received for what it is. You can be received for who you are. So it's less a question of shifting the mind, of fixing the mind, of thinking in a particular way, and more a question of not holding against the simple truth of where you are. Because if it's true that I'm sad at this moment, it's also true that sometimes I'm not sad. It's also true that Gurbani brings relief. It's also true there are many other things that are also true. But if I get caught in I'm sad and I shouldn't be, there's really no exit from that. And I've found that helping folks simply be present with who they are, finding their voice to be able to speak their truth, to have that received, is freeing. And so Satnam, and apologies to Guru Nanak if I didn't stay
you
on
did great.
track with Japji.
Thank you. That was good. Very nice. Thank you. Dr. Gobinderjeet Kaur, I have a rather long preamble to this question, but I hope you'll appreciate it. In my research, I came across a fantastic resource in the form of the British Sikh Report. And this is an annual online report that focuses on the issues within the British Sikh community. And in one report on mental health, there was a discussion about how Sikhs in the UK of older generations are stigmatized and find it difficult to talk about mental health issues. Due to their Punjabi heritage, many Sikh men feel obliged to project a hyper-masculinity that doesn't allow them to admit to any weaknesses. And many Sikh women of Punjabi heritage, already dealing with shame issues within the households of their in-laws, cannot admit to any struggles, personal struggles, that may be seen as imperfections. So how do you support Sikh men and women to overcome these obstacles to seeking help?
Thank you for that question. So just a note though about the British Sikh Report, as great a resource that it is. Unfortunately, I think the population it serves doesn't represent fully the Sikh population, because I think unfortunately they don't get much of an uptake to complete the questions. However, having said that, there's obviously mental health is an issue within every community, and we're seeing that in Seek Your Mind in the Sikh community. With men's mental health particularly, what we know is that men do find it difficult to access support, whether that's Punjabi men or not. But what we have seen is actually quite an increased uptake for mental health services for men with Seek Your Mind. So people have been coming and requesting support. Obviously, because we work on social media predominantly and we advertise there, that the age groups that we see might be slightly younger than the older generations. I do have to also say that I'm sure all of you know, but historically there's been a real narrative around the Sikh community and minority ethnic communities not accessing services due to stigma and taboo. Whilst that's not completely incorrect. What we do need to really take note of, and I think with Black Lives Matter, it's been pushed to the forefront, that movement. We need to take into account structural inequalities, structural racism, and all the other kind of aspects that sort of form unequal access to services, as well as the difficulties that reside in asking for help in those populations. I think one of the things in the Sikh population, and we have an amazing history of shaheeds, of martyrs, of men and women, but often we hear about the men. So obviously our gurus, the Panch Pyare, the Char Sahibzade, Banda Singh Bahadur, like the list goes on. And so sometimes what I see with some of my Punjabi male Sikh clients is something that we call spiritual bypassing. Which is when, it's almost like religion's used as a defense. So when we try and get to an emotional experience, but no, it's fine, I'm fine, because this is what our gurus did, and I will, I'm okay. And yeah, so religion and faith and spirituality can be really helpful. But there are times when I've seen in therapy that actually they just act as another barrier, really, because it's the way in which we're connecting to that faith and religious space, rather than sort of thinking about our inner development. We're using it as but I should be like this, something that one of the other speakers was saying. So it can be then difficult then to go beyond that, because actually there's this real strong narrative of I must be okay. And as one of the speakers said earlier, actually what we know in the UK and across the world, unfortunately, there is another narrative of Punjabi men and alcohol use. And if we think about the alcohol or drug use, it's a coping strategy. It's a way to manage difficulties, manage life experiences potentially, but it's short term. And so often, if we think about our sort of generations before us, they've not had the same attention, I would say. I was speaking to my dad a couple of weeks ago, and he said actually the priority for his parents, so he's in his 60s, the priority for his parents was money and clothes. That was the priority, to ensure that was available for the family. The priority for my dad's generation were education and again finances. And so we, as maybe second, third generation, our priorities are different because of what our ancestors, our relations before us has set the foundation for. So we can then look at sort of more self-actualization, kind of sort of reaching Sachkhand, which is what we want to do as Sikhs, reaching our guru and not having to live this life again. So we have the privilege to that degree then to do that. So I think we're in a good place in that sense, and men and women. Unfortunately, men of a certain age are at quite a high risk of suicide. I'm not sure of the statistics across the world, but definitely in the UK, I think it's sort of late 30s to 50s. They're really at high risk of ending their lives, and unfortunately, I have heard of Sikh men during this pandemic who have done that. And I think it's a combination of factors, some of which I've explained, but also the narrative in families of not talking about what's going on. Because yes, you might need to remain stoic as a man, you're the possible breadwinner, but there's so much that we can draw on, but it's finding the right sangat. And Gurbani talks about Sangat hugely, which is why in Seek Your Mind particularly, we're really interested in treatment as like group interventions, because actually if you can come together with Sangat, Sat Sangat, who share the same values as you, and to think about Gurbani and to think about mental health, because Gurbani and mental health and that discussion's all one. That can be a really good way to support people.
Excellent. Yes. Of course, during this time of COVID, it's a little more difficult to get together. But yes, seeking Sangat is an amazing remedy. I'd like to now sort of take this question over to Dr. Satkor, because this concept of spiritual bypass, which Dr. Gurbendrajit Kaur mentioned, is something that I think applies in a similar way. People who see themselves on a spiritual path may also find it difficult to talk about their own struggles with mental health issues. They may feel shame about not having fixed themselves through their meditative or yogic practices, or they may be in denial. They may have convinced themselves that they are above those kind of challenges or feelings, or above anxiety and worry. How do you support people in that place to opening up and being able to talk about what they're feeling?
Well, first and foremost, it's important for them to feel as though their practices are something that can support them as they address these issues. But what I try to explain is that unless you deal with some of the root causes of the state that you're in, whether it's depression or anxiety or a number of, just basically flat and unresponsive, if you don't deal with the underlying issues, then you're basically putting a Band-Aid on a wound that won't heal. That it needs to be dug into, it needs to be cleared and cleaned, and then the practices support that healing. But when people try to use the practice and avoid what's underneath it, they don't get the kind of results that they are looking for or want or will be helpful. And so it's really educating people about the significance of actually going to a deeper place and dealing with the underlying issues so that the practice is supported from the ground up. So that's really how I would approach it with someone who's trying to spiritually bypass.
A lot to think about there. Thank you.
Welcome.
Jasvinder, I have a question that I hope will be relevant to your experiences in the field. Many young people today are feeling like the prime of their life is being stolen, denied, that they are being kept from the activities that give them joy and that enrich their lives moving forward, maybe even feeling stopped in their pursuit of education or career. What do you say to them? And are you guided or inspired by Gurmat, by the teachings of Sikhi, to point young people into a particular understanding that helps them through this time?
This is a very deeply personal issue for me. I have a daughter who's 18, who started her first year of university this September. I have a younger daughter who's in grade 11. So all the things that our children look forward to, high school graduation, starting university, all that was taken away. She has a grad dress that's in her closet. It wasn't even fitted because COVID happened. So there's a lot of stress. I've seen a young people, a lot of my peers who have children who are in the same situation. We've been talking about the impact of the pandemic on our children. When my children were young, just from a personal perspective, I put a poster in the room. And that poster was of a brave Sikh woman warrior on a horse with a sword, leading an army of men. And I put that poster in the room, a playroom. So when they grow up throughout the years, they have this vision. And they watch Mulan too to help provide some supplement information. So I raised my children in a way where they took martial arts as well. Just to share personally, my mother was a victim of domestic abuse. something I grew up with. And when I was in grade 7, she decided to leave my father, and we moved to social housing. So I grew up with, I don't like to use the word racism because I'm from a small town near, in northern British Columbia, near Alaska. I don't like to use the word racism. I'll use words like racial bias or just ignorance, because a lot of folks I scrapped with, fought with, when we do talk now, we understand what was really going on then. And it wasn't necessarily racism. And then at home, I would see this violence in the home. I'd see the lack of support that my mother, she didn't have from her family. So for me, I've always had this approach that you have to be ready. Life is not going to be a guarantee of happiness. And when I was a child, I had a gutka, and I would read Raras. I'd read my nickname Banis. And one thing really struck me, which was the concept of dukh daru. Suffering is the remedy, the cure. We're going to be celebrating Diwali. Diva mera ik naam, dukh vich paya tel. So Sikhi has the tools for us to understand the nature of suffering, that suffering is going to be a constant. Just like on a rose bush, the thorns are going to be year-round. The flower, the beauty, the fragrance of the flower, it blooms, it disappears. It blooms, it disappears. But the thorns, they're always going to be pricking you. And we have to develop the ability to be mindfully aware of the fragrance, the beauty of the flower when it blooms, and to be able to mindfully navigate around the thorns that prick us. I find with a lot of my clients, even the Caucasian clients, they have a lot of relief when they see me, especially if they're Christian. And the reasons I have relief when they see me is because they'll say, you know, we live in a secular society, and sometimes we feel we can't share our faith. I can't show my cross because I feel I'm going to be judged, and I can't talk about my faith. Whereas when I see a Sikh man, you're wearing your faith. Externally, you're showing the world who you are. And I feel safe. I could talk to you about my experiences. So when I work with children who come from Sikh backgrounds or Muslim backgrounds or from Christian backgrounds, religion provides an opportunity to make a meaning of the suffering. For Sikhs, we grew up with the Ardas. Today in Canada, we're celebrating Remembrance Day, our veterans. A Sikh celebrates their veterans, their soldiers, every day, multiple times with the Ardas. We remember the sacrifices. When I grew up, I had a calendar of all the shaheeds during the Sikh Guru's time. And that's building resiliency. So religion provides a tool for young people to understand the nature of suffering and how to cope with it. No doubt they are going to have challenges. But when I see folks who come from a culture where they want instant relief, everything should be instant, and that's taken away from them, they're literally like a fish out of water. Because everything that they thought in this world, which is the Maya, the illusion, it's gone. And now it's like a corpse. There's no life. And when I look at the year 2020, we talk about 2020 vision. So this year 2020, in a way, has been a blessing for us to really look beyond the veil of illusion of Maya and to get a sense of who we are and what makes us happy. So back to the quote from Japji, Mana jite jagjit. I know a lot of people translate it as conquer the mind, conquer the world. But this line was in reference to the Nath yogis, this particular line. Mana jite jagjite. When you conquer the mind, you don't necessarily conquer the world by accumulating things in the world. You're able to resist the desires of the world. And once you resist the desires of the world, you conquer the world. So 2020 is an opportunity for us to have conversations with our young people on how to become resilient and to move forward. These things happen in life. We live in the Western Hemisphere. We're suffering, but when I talk to people who come from other parts of the world, they'll say, you know, every day is a pandemic for us, given the things we have to deal with. So this is a reset for humanity, and we have to bring it back to Duk Daru. Right? We've been living in a lot of pleasure, indulging in the pleasures of the world. And now, as one of my clients said, a clean-shaven Punjabi alcoholic Sikh, he said to me, this pandemic is Waheguru saying, I'm still here. I found that so profound.
Thank you. Very, very insightful. I've got some questions that I'm going to bring forward now that are not specifically focused to any one of the panelists. So after I finish this first one, just wave if you have something you'd like to say about this. And if nobody has anything to say, we'll just move on to another question. I wanted to stay with this concept of resilience. The concept of Chardi Kala is meaning upward rising spirit, is, I think, one of the most positive aspects of Sikhi. When we tap into that space of acceptance and inspiration, it seems like almost anything can be overcome. If you use this concept with your clients, how do you frame it? How do you frame the steps they would need to take to get from where they are to a more elevated or more accepting, more energetic, more engaged space? Anybody like to take that on? Satkorji.
Sanam, translating that to a different way of saying it is people tend to focus on what they don't want, and then they don't understand why they keep manifesting it. So what I try to help people to do is to recognize that that's the human tendency, is to focus on what you don't want and begin to shift it into what they actually do want. And when people start to focus on what they do want and it starts to manifest, then it elevates them in that whole process. And they begin to see that they are creating their reality. And that's a translation of what you've just said in sort of a Western concept that Sikhi is certainly the root of. And the technology that we have within Sikhi is profound. But it's a way for people to be able to embrace it with a more of a Western mind. So it's a step to help people make that transition from focusing on what they don't want to what they do want and creating an elevation in their spirit.
Very nice. Thank you. Anybody would like to add to this discussion on this question? Okay, Guru Charan Singh.
I think about the spiritual bypass in relation to Chardi Kala, and as distinct from a kind of Jivan Mukt, the embodied spirit. And I think, for me in Gurdwara, with Siddhi Guru Granth, with Shabad and Sangat, it's very easy to experience Charity Kala. And not living in a large community, it's very challenging to sustain it. And so, how to sustain it when we're not actively engaged in the dharmic practices becomes an important aspect. And to be able to, for example, with clients, they expect to share what makes them unhappy. And they often are quite good at that. But when I notice things that are to be celebrated in their lives, it's often very difficult for them to acknowledge that. And it's challenging for as many folks as I see as not. It's challenging for them to embody Charity Kala, to claim the joy of their life, to embody their connection with the divine. And so, taking from the spiritual connection, which frees us, and bringing it into the relational space and into the individual embodied experience is what sustains us over time, I believe. And so, feeling grounded in spirit has real value. And yet we're having this human experience, embodied spirit embodied in relation to other embodied spirits, other human beings. And to be able to bring Charity Kala into our relationships and into the times when, through things like COVID or depression, we feel so isolated and alone and disconnected from the spiritual realm and even from the relational realm, to be able to hold that in ways outside of Sangat, outside of Gurdwara, outside of the active practice of Gurbani, becomes an important grounding component. That's where your question took me. So,
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. I want to remind our listeners, our viewers, that we only have about 10, 12 minutes left. So if you have some questions that you'd like to ask the panel, please go ahead and put them into the comments section. In the meantime, I have more to ask of the panel. So this is a toss-up. Not that we're keeping points on any of this, but the concept for me of what Guru Nanak mentions as Nadar Nihal, the glance of grace, is particularly comforting to me during this time. And it's the idea that we can cultivate that relationship with the divine in such a way that then we see that manifesting, we see that connection, we feel that perhaps as grace, as divine blessing. And I'm wondering whether any of you, as in your therapy, whether this is a concept that enters into how you dialogue with your clients around this time and feelings of isolation or depression. Anybody? Please, Dr. Gurbinder Jeet, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. So, I mean, a predominant number of my clients are non-Sikh, but what that made me think of is something that Carl Jung coined the term numinous, and that kind of, it's a spiritual experience, and it's about the unconscious, because that's, I mean, Gurbani says the same. What we're trying to do is make the unconscious conscious. You know, from my little understanding. So if I make any mistakes, please do forgive me. So in terms of the way I work and kind of drawing on psychoanalytical thinking and helping people to connect with their sort of unconscious in those sessions has been really important, to then have those moments of if we want to call it the kind of connection with God, that kind of spiritual moments, that I think most of my clients would call it like a spiritual moment, where they feel like there's that something bigger that we all are aware of, but my clients who wouldn't say they were religious particularly really connect with and help them make sense of everything that's happened. And I think in terms of Sikhi, Sikhi teaches us again, my understanding teaches us like patience, having the patience on this journey, because this journey is not easy. It's not easy at all. This path isn't easy. But Gurbani, we have Gurbani. We are so lucky, especially during these really difficult times, which absolutely, as one of the speakers said, is our medicine. This is what we want. It's a bit like I'm trying to reframe death. Often in English culture, it's sorry, going off on a tangent, we say, I'm really sorry for your loss. Why be sorry? They've hopefully they've left this world and they're reaching a better place, and we would want it to believe that it is such that it's you don't have to live this world again. So it's kind of reframing a lot of these conversations and connecting with the spirituality on my clients' level. But I do work with people with severe and enduring mental health, so I can't say that happens all the time or regularly, but it's the moments, because everything is about relationships, the relationship that we have with each other, with ourselves, with our guru, with something higher, and so that manifests in the clinical room. And so actually, if as Sikhs, we see God in everyone, so we have those spiritual moments, and we might not term it as such, but they definitely exist.
Yes, thank you. I have maybe another question, and then I am looking to see if we have any questions. We've got one that says, "What's the best technique to deal with anxiety?" And we'll get into that a little bit later, just as we wrap up. And we've got Rakveer bringing in a comment that's quite nice. I found doing Simran slowly with each breath, focusing on Shabad, really helps connect with infinite truth and grounds me for the day's journey. Yes, thank you. That's wonderful. And we're going to look at a few other concepts of real techniques that people can do during this time. So this is a question to the whole panel. Some people are able to manage the current level of stress through positive coping responses that they had already developed earlier in their lives. But some will fall into negative coping responses, like the use of substances like alcohol and drugs. Do you have experience directing people who are from a Sikh or a yoga background toward interventions that are based more within the Sikh tradition? And if so, what have you found useful? Anybody? Don't be shy. Okay, good at Charan, thank you. And Satkor will go next.
Well, briefly, I've really been shifting my focus. Now it's all online. All the work that I do is online. And it's really moving into a webinar focus. And it's blending meditative practices from what I would consider using Sikh mantra and Sikh tradition, along with what I found to be a value in the Western psychological traditions. And so most of the work that I do now really is in sharing meditation mantra that can be practiced each day at home with support through weekly gatherings to share experience, to problem solve practice, and things like that. There's a significant portion of this which is good clinical research associated with the effectiveness of this practice. And so, and there's more research being done every day. So there are, in fact, mantra-based meditations that have both research from the external frame, the objective frame, and personal subjective experience that has real value for things like improving sleep, lifting depression, reducing anxiety, reducing stress, things like that.
Thank you. Dr. Satkor.
Along those same lines is what Dr. Charan Singh is talking about. I have a client who recently was 24 years sober and started to drink again. And I shared with that person a meditation from Muktakar's book about addiction, and she had very positive experiences by having done that meditation, and came back to me and said, wow, I really do feel the difference, and has stopped drinking again. So, what Charan is saying is absolutely true. There is empirical evidence of the use of mantra, the use of meditation, that has profound effects in helping people in this time that perhaps is a much higher level of anxiety and depression than without these circumstances. So I just wanted to share that.
Yes, thank you. Excellent. All right. Yes, Dr. Gobinderjeet. We're actually going to sort of close it up with a round robin question where each of you will get just a couple minutes to speak. And so here it is. In normal times, if you are a Sikh, it is common to take your worries to the Gurdwara, either to have darshan with the Siddhi Guru Granth Sahib, or perhaps to perform seva, selfless service. But during the pandemic, we are mostly not able to do these things. In normal times, it is common to seek solace or community by attending perhaps a yoga class, but also not possible right now. There are online, but you don't get the community support from not being there in person. So please just each of you share one thing, something that people can do, some practice, something to participate in that you can suggest to people that they can do during this time to help them manage their stress due to COVID pandemic. So, Jasvinder Singh, can we start with you?
I've had this asked many times, where do we go to worship? And I think Bhai Gurdas gives the solution to that. Bhai Gurdas, whose Vara are seen as the keys to the Guru Granth Sahib, wrote, Kar kar andar dharmsal. Within every home is a dharmsal. Now, home could be our physical home, or it could be the home of this body. So Bhai Gurdas was making it very clear that it's very important for a Sikh to have a place of worship within this bodily shrine and within their home. So that's something we've been encouraged to do since day one in Sikhi. Kar kar andar dharmsal. Number 2, let's look at the beauty of Guru Nanak's Aarti. We read Kirtan Sola. And our Aarti is so beautiful, no pandemic can stop it. All you have to do is walk outside, enjoy the breeze, hear the birds, smell the fragrance. This Aarti and experience the Naam flowing within us, within the birds, the squirrels, looking at how the squirrels working so hard in the cold. When we had the shutdown in March for 2 weeks, it was pin drop silence. And I think I was probably the happiest. It was so quiet. I couldn't hear a jumbo jet. I couldn't hear any cars on the freeway. It was just the silence. It's like
Beautiful.
Maya had come to a standstill. So we have the tools available to us, and we just need to execute them in a way that's going to be beneficial to ourselves and for our families during these times.
Excellent. Thank you, Satnam. Dr. Satkor.
A very quick little technique that I've been sharing with people a lot is doing the 2 breaths per minute. That's a 10-second inhale. Hold the breath for 10, exhale 10. Immediately inhale 10, hold 10, exhale 10. I've been suggesting to people to do it for 5 minutes at a time, 5 times a day, because going back to the question about Guru Nanak, it is when you can control your breath, you can control your mind, and it is an antidote for anxiety as well as depression. So it's just a quick little tool. There's no mantra, there's no mudra, but it is a tool that you can use anywhere and reclaim control of your mind.
Beautiful. And I would add sitting or standing. You know, you do it in any situation. It's great.
Driving. You can do it driving.
Yes. Just don't get spaced out. Okay. Yeah. Dr. Gurvinderjeet Kaur.
What comes to my mind is with the Seek Your Mind, we've been doing some research looking at how Sikhs in the UK have coped during the pandemic and the impact of Gurdwara closures. So this is really apt. And what I found was that, so I spoke to different members of different Gurdwara across the UK, and one Gurdwara in particular, the biggest one in London actually, had, they put a Gurbani tuk on the front door that said, you know, first accept death and then give up any hope of life. And I thought that was so powerful. I mean, Gurbani is powerful in itself, but that just, for this Gurukar, for this Gurdwara, it highlighted that don't be scared, actually, you know, don't worry. It's easy to say, it's easy for me to sit here and say this, but, you know, this is when we let the Guru, when we really give up and give our worries to our Guru, that is when we are free. We are free to focus on the things that really matter. And alongside that, one of the biggest things that we found in this research was Seva. Mm-hmm. So when we do Seva, whatever that looks like, whether that starts in your own home with different generations, maybe who are coming together now, who live together and you're spending more time together, whether that's helping within the home or outside of the home, we found youngsters to older generations safely giving out food to many, many different populations across the UK. And this is something, especially for young people in the UK, young Sikhs, they would never have stepped inside a Gurdwara. They would never have gone into the Langar Hall. They would never have made dal, sabji, lentils, vegetables. They would never have made it before. And this opportunity was amazing because these young people, as we said before, they lost their structure, they lost their routines. Similarly for the elderly generations who really looked at the Gurdwara as the center of their lives, they lost all of that in some sense. And so coming together to help those who needed it, and that it was such a variety of people, it really, really helped them to not only connect with each other, to connect with our values as Sikhs, but also to connect with the Guru and the things that are really important, which is connecting with each other and to care about each other. And so that was powerful. We found that was probably one of the biggest things that really helped, because what we're talking about here is a form of collective trauma. And what we know is that in collective trauma, collective healing, that's the intervention.
That's beautiful. Thank you for that. That's inspiring words. And Dr. Guru Charan, can you take us home on this topic?
I'm a big believer in lists, so I would encourage people to make 2 lists. The first list would be what enlivens you. And the second list is what deadens you. And I would do the things on the first list and not do the things on the second list. Um, what enlivens you in your body? Move your body. Move your body. Run in place. Go for a walk. Go in nature. What enlivens you in relationship? Call people who energize you, who you love, who you care about. Spend time with them, even if it's on the phone. It's enlivening. And what are those spiritual practices that enliven you? Do them. Take a hookum. Read your Banis. Do your meditation. Shout out to SikhNet. Play Gurbani Kirtan 24/7 in your home, in your office. Let the Shabad elevate you. Engage in that which enlivens you, and cut back on pie, cake, and cookies, which are enticing but ultimately deaden you. That's my simple encouragement.
Thank you. I feel very enlivened. Thank you. I want to really thank all my wonderful guests that could make time. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your words of insight and encouragement. I want to say to the listeners, thank you for attending. Please do like and share this program. As you see along the bottom of the screen, our next week's program will be the second episode in our ongoing series called The Roots of Sikh Dharma, and we'll be talking about Guru Nanak. So please join us then, and thank you all for attending. Panelists, you can stay where you are. I'm going to close us out. Thank you so much, everyone.